Hey guys. Yeah, it's 9/11. Such a sad day. Or as Gen Z would say, happy 9/11. But I was supposed to go to the doctor today, but they canceled and rescheduled because I didn't get my x-ray or the blood test. And I was like, you said that in order to get the x-ray changed, I needed to go there. And so they had it changed anyway that I could get the x-ray done, the area I need without going there. So that will be um, later because today I just took a bath and I well listed some makeup. I had some of my listings taken down actually for a bureau, which is when like one of the companies says that your item is counterfeit, even though it's not. It was from Huda Beauty, but I'm gonna see if I can list it on like Poshmark. Not a huge deal, but like, ouch. So sorry. Okay, there you are. There you are. I look good in the leggings. You just think that because you're not used to seeing me in pants. But whatever's more unusual. If I took them off and you weren't used to that, you'd say you look good without leggings. Okay, but that's very nice of you. Thank you. Um, Let me take a sip of this. So I still don't have my voice back, but that's fine. Mm, mm. Okay. Okay, we're on chapter 30. Lyman caught up with Sheila's limo as it turned onto Old Water Canyon. He pulled up beside the driver's window and gave Paul a thumbs up. Again, the reflection of the lights on the car's glass, he could barely make out Paul's nod and grin. Glancing behind Lyman, couldn't see anything out of the ordinary in the traffic. Switching lanes, he maneuvered to the car's right side and stayed even with Paul as they slowed for a red light. He rolled to a stop across from the right rear passenger door and looked over expectantly. Even before the stretched Cadillac came to a complete stop, Sheila opened the door, stepped out, helmet on her head, and slammed the door shut behind her. In a flash, she was on behind Lyman, her arms tight about his middle. "Let's go," she cried, glee filling her voice. Okay, so the limo must have brought her somewhere. She catches up with Lyman, and now they're on the motorcycle together. Okay. Mm. Uh, when the light turned, Lyman waved at Paul and rolled the throttle, letting the big Indian bellow as he pulled away. He signaled, pulled into the right lane, and turned off on a side road. "Want to go straight to Crystal's or ride for a while?" She was laughing, the little girl sound of it filling his soul with joy. "God, Lyman, I'm really doing this. I feel free, 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 free." She whooped, raising her arms to the night and jiggling the bike. Hey Terry, do you like to ride your bike at night or during the day? I think a lot of people like to drive at night because there's less people on the road, you know. So it's like a little more free, I guess. Um, hey, let's not wreck us in the process, all right? God, no, this is too good to be true. She snugged her arms around him and squeezed the breath out of him. I want to ride for a while, but we do have to go by Crystal's first. I told her I'd be there at around 11. She'll worry if we don't check in. Right. Lyman flicked the turn signal and bent them into a turn, heading around the block and back toward Cristal's. Hey, Sheila said as she leaned her chin on his shoulder. Hey, he answered gently. It was really good to see you pull up alongside Lyman. When Cristal told me to stow my helmet and leathers in the limo, I was just hoping against hope. Mm. Oh yeah, I forget about the chill factor when you're outside. Oh hey Shane, how's the chiropractor? You need to call on Friday. We need to have a conversation about pains and cracks. um, uh, he sighed. Yeah, well, I'm an accomplice now. Rex will skin me alive if he ever figures this out. Well, Rex can go screw himself. Rex is not you, babe. Sheila muttered. I don't know, Lyman. Should I fire him? He's the best in the business. At what price? She wondered. When I talked to him this afternoon, he hinted that I might want to think about changing security firms. Oh, yeah, fire him. Lyman's like, the fuck? Little submissive vibe. Should I put them on you? Here, I'll buy them in your size. they're uh, they're pleasers. Mm, mm. Okay, where is it? He said you stiffed him for another 10,000 in your bill. Yeah, and I'll bet he didn't tell you I ate 5,000 of the 20 the IRS hit me for. I divided it with you since part of the fault was Rex's for prepaying me last month. He didn't think of what that would make the quarterly earnings look like. If I'm down at the end of the quarter, you'll get the benefit then too. Do we have to talk business? No, he signaled for a left and slowed to wait out the traffic. Mm. Mm. At the entrance to Cristal's residence inn. Uh oh. Uh oh, Cristal. Uh oh. Now I wonder, is she there yet with the groceries? Because she lost stuffed turkey. Remember? Mm. At the first break in the oncoming cars, he slipped the clutch and pulled into the lot, aware of a Porsche hot on his heels. He noticed that the sleek car pulled into the registration space, and a young man leapt out, watching the Indian as Lyman rounded the end of the speed bump and idled toward Cristal's. People noticed the Indian. It was unique, with the styled fenders and the huge engine. People didn't walk up to it thinking it was just another Harley. He started to pull into the space before Crystal's, then noticed the van. Its side door open. A knot of people were hurrying down the walk, a limp looking body propped in their midst. Oh no, is it Cristal? What the hell? It looks like someone had one too many to drink, Sheila said, as Lyman slowed and put a foot down. The bike dropped into its loping idle, shaking beneath him as he watched. They were landing the person into the door. Lyman saw a swaying of hair. Something about the woman's slim form. Hey! He let the clutch out, rolling forward. What the hell's going on here? A man turned, tall, blond-headed. He looked handsome in the glow of the sodium lights. Nothing that's your business. My wife just drank a little too much, that's all. Lyman eased to a steep several feet from the van, craning his head to see inside. He could feel Sheila tense behind him. Cristal? He called. His only warning was a blur as the man leaped, caught him on the shoulder with both hands, and tumbled Lyman, Sheila, and the Indian onto the pavement. Lyman's body slammed hard, his helmet cracking loudly against the asphalt. He got his hand under him, pushing up, only to feel the weight of the Indian trapping his calf and foot. Son of a bitch! He heard the engine roar, looked up past the bike, and saw the van careen back, lurched to a stop, and then squealed the tires as it rocketed ahead, hammered the speed bump, and screeched into the night. Sheila, are you all right? Fine. She was wiggling behind him. Shit, what happened? He flopped like a trap fish, got a hand up to press the chicken switch on the handlebar, and heard the big twin chug to a stop. Someone just took Cristal. He threw himself desperately against the weight of the big motorcycle. I don't fucking believe it. Hang on, Sheila muttered. I've about got my foot loose. Lyman turned his head at the sound of footsteps. He could see the young man running across from the registration building. He held a big blocky camera before him, stopping to shoot a couple of quick pictures before saying, Hey, shit, Sheila Marks, what a hit! Then he lifted the camera to shoot another couple of frames. Okay, now we get a paragraph ahead. Friday night in the summer was always a busy time at the police station in Beverly Hills. This one was no exception. Lyman barely managed to keep a shackled drunk from puking on Sheila as they made their way down the hallway. The interview room they had been taken to was off a hallway, soundproofed and apparently wired for sound. The room, painted off-white, wasn't more than 10 by 8, with the proverbial one-way mirror framed into the one wall. A thick and heavy metal table dominated the center. Each leg had been bolted securely to the cement floor. The cubicle felt decidedly cramped with 6 people in it. I don't get it, Lyman growled as he shifted from foot to foot. To Sheila, he looked like a caged lion. Something in the set of his face, in the rage behind his eyes, both fascinated and repelled her. Her own adrenaline was still rushing through her veins like a tonic. 2 uniformed cops sat on the other side of the battered gunmetal gray table and stared uneasily at Sheila, where she leaned against the far wall. In reply, she stared back. The paparazzo, a freelance photographer named Mark Delangelo, glowed, while his girlfriend Jennifer Schmidt looked sheepish as they sat in 2 of the plastic chairs. I got it all, Mark was beaming. I mean, I ran a half roll of those people carrying that woman to the van. It's dark, Hurley, one of the cops, protested. It's an IR camera, man, Mark cried as he tapped a finger on the heavy camera resting on the table. I don't need a flash, get it? I can shoot in any light. The second cop, Randisi, according to his tag, said, Look, you've got no proof that this Cristal Inea was abducted. These might have been friends of hers who were taking care of her. She was new to town, Lyman replied. She didn't have friends here. Yes, she did, Sheila interjected. She had me. A fire was burning within her. And she had you, Lyman. Then there's that FBI agent. Sid Harness, but he's in Washington. FBI? Randisi asked. A mutual friend. Lyman was grinding his teeth. Sheila pushed off the wall and stepped over. Look, officer, maybe she wasn't abducted. We'll have a better idea when we process Mr. D'Angelo's film. Hey, it's my film. My personal property, protected under the First Amendment. It may be evidence, Hurley corrected. Sheila felt her blood begin to boil as she turned on the photographer. What's it worth to you, huh? I'll give you 50,000 right now, sight unseen. Hell, you might have left a lens cap on, forgot to put film in the camera, who knows? D'Angelo swallowed hard. 75,000. Bullshit! Lyman exploded, wheeling around. The look on his face sent a cold shiver down Sheila's spine. She raised a hand, blocking him. Easy, Lyman, take a breath. He did, keeping the maniacal rage from boiling over. She looked past him at the two cops. She could read their expressions, wary, as if sensing the stakes and unsure who to finger for the coming explosion. Well, cops can get a warrant for the footage, right? Like they can if it's like a ring camera, if it's for like an abduction. Uh, Sorry you hear barking. It's trash night, and that's Fila. Okay. Gentlemen, Sheila said professionally, I would appreciate it if your crime scene people could go over Miss Anea's apartment. I realize that you might have budget concerns, but if you will call your chief, I believe I can find some sort of reasonable compensation for your department. The two cops glanced at each other, and Randisi made a slight tilt of the head. Hurley stood, nodded, and let himself out into the hall. Lyman was thinking now. She could see it. You got a file on Cristal. She pressed charges a couple of weeks ago during the Manuel de Klerk thing. She identified the same woman at de Klerk's who took Miss Marks's tampon at the Regent Beverly Wilshire. If I were you, I'd start there. Randisi watched them through half-lidded eyes, his fingers tapping on the statements they had just signed. Hey, I'm out of here, D'Angelo muttered. Come on, Jennifer. You'll leave when I tell you, Sheila barked, using her stage voice. I'm not done with you. Bullshit, D'Angelo cried. I'm sitting on the biggest shot of my life here. Sheila walked up to stare into his eyes. What if I told you there was more here than the simple abduction of a security agent? What if I told you that you are sitting on the biggest story of the decade? Are you shitting me? Oh, it's not 9/11 or Afghanistan or Iraq, but it's something that could make your career. If you're interested, you'll play ball. If not, I'll write you a check for 75,000 for that camera right now. He hesitated, frowned, and she read him like a comic book. He didn't even have complicated illustrations. This is bullshit. No bullshit, Sheila replied. You're in or out. D'Angelo glanced at Jennifer, who was shaking her head no. He licked his lips, the frown line deepening in his forehead. 75, though. No shit? Done. Sheila stuck her hand out. Rex will have a check for you in the morning. Security will let you through. She reached for the camera. Hey, Randisi gestured at the camera. That's not leaving this room until I say it is. Sheila tossed him the heavy camera. How long will it take your people to develop infrared film? He caught it by instinct and grunted as the weight rocked him back in his chair. We can have it in a couple of hours, if it's a rush. It's a rush, Lyman said, leaning over the table to stare into Randisi's eyes. Okay, so we're going to have another paragraph ahead now. Hank stared down at Cristal's bound body. Oh, God, they have her. And wondered how it had all gone so wrong. The van slowly worked its way through the desultory late night traffic. Lyman's gonna kick your ass, Hank. That's what I'm guessing. I'll see. He rode in the back, seated on one of the benches, while April held his hand. Her fingers were drawing designs on his palm. Something about her excited him in a way that no other woman ever had. She was a mixture of dare, challenge, and sensuality. Hell, she was Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct. Hank had never understood that character until he looked into April's saucy gaze and saw her soul sway with his. Meanwhile, they have this limp body on the ground. Psychopath. He needed only to close his eyes and his dick began to tingle. Again, Chantal's limp body is lying there. Eek. Mm. Images of their afternoon lovemaking replayed in his head. He could see her golden body, so perfect, rising and falling sinuously as she held his wrist down. All right, well, I'd get checked out for syphilis if I was you. Ugh. Mm. This woman gets around. Ouch. Ugh. When she'd come, her breast had tightened, straining at the air. In that instant, his body had exploded with a pulsing orgasm. See, I was really hoping we hear about like Lyman and Sheila making love, not this fucking weirdo. Pulsing orgasm that left him buckling under her weight with every nerve on fire. Yeah, who cares? So, does it matter? We've got Cristal. She'll talk. That's all we want. Just a little talk. You idiot. He turned to smile at April, his guilt assuaged. Yeah, sure, loser. And then he looked down at Cristal, remembering another night, another man. That time, he laid atop her. He remembered moaning when he came, remembered her tightening around him to make it better. How were they supposed to know they were being recorded? That a few days later, surrounded by his colleagues, he would watch his bare buttocks rising and falling in a black and white nightmare. The camera angle had recorded Cristal's face when she finally came. He caught her open mouth, her eyes closed in delight, and her throat working as pleasure pulsed through her. She was a drunk. It was probably considered rape. Loser. As he stared down in the dimly lit van, her slack expression reminded him of that night. We just want to talk, he swallowed. Yeah, sure. Shit, what had he done? He glanced at April, words of protest rising, only to be blunted and fall away in confusion as she leaned over to kiss him on the lips. The plan had worked like proverbial clockwork. At the Residence Inn, he had watched Cristal climb the steps a little before 11 that night. 3 plastic bags of groceries hung from her hands. Slipping them onto her left arm, she had fished her key out of her purse, slid it into the lock, and walked into her apartment. Hank had stepped out the door of the opposing unit and had been right behind her, his presence as a blocker unnecessary. Cristal had flipped on the lights and walked into her room. It was only when she turned to close the door that he had seen surprise in her eyes. Hank? We've got to talk, he told her, stepping in and shutting the door behind him. He watched the sudden anger in her face and raised his hands, distracting her as Neil walked up from behind on crepe-soled shoes. We've got nothing to talk about. Cristal's hand nodded on her grocery bags. Some thought flashed in her eyes, an understanding that something was dreadfully wrong. She started to turn when Neil reached out and pulled her back. As she started to scream, he had neatly inserted a syringe into her neck and depressed the plunger. What is that stuff? Hank asked, worried for the first time. Just a little oil for the system. Neil back-heeled Cristal to the couch, keeping one hand pressed over her mouth as she bucked in his strong arms. The grocery bags tumbled to the floor. The turkey made a hollow thump Cans and bottles rolled across the white vinyl. Her purse bounced off the corner of the couch and spilled open. This sounds like my worst nightmare, but I feel like if I came home, like my dogs would attack. You know, like they'd have to hurt my dogs first, in which case I don't even want to think about that. My babies. Mm. April and Gretchen stepped out into the main room, each smiling down at Crystal. Got you at last, bitch, Gretchen snarled. She drew back a foot for a kick. Whoa. April stopped her, saying, not now. She glanced at Hank, praise in her gray eyes. Nice work, Hank. She never suspected a thing. You're good. He glowed at the compliment. Glad to be of service. Cristal's struggles had gone weak, rage draining from her dark eyes to be replaced by a dreamy look. Neil took his hand from her mouth and looked down at the blood welling on his palm. She bit me. Hope you had your shots, April chided. Hank stared. Cristal's face had gone slack, blood on her lips. Must have hurt like hell. Not the worst I've ever gotten. Neil walked over to the sink, found the paper towels, and began dabbing at his hand. April leaned down, staring into Cristal's eyes. We're from Genesis Athena. Hank saw the change in Cristal's face. Ah, April said in a friendly voice. That's why you went to Colorado, isn't it? Ugh, I cannot wait until April gets whatever's coming to her. Cristal blinked and not a girl's girl. Cristal blinked and frowned, as if having trouble following the conversation. Although Cristal isn't either, considering Hank's wife, so. Do you know what Genesis Athena is? Yes, Cristal murmured. You're witches. April laughed at that. Do you know what we're doing? Cristal blinked hard, made a face, and said, You're stealing souls. April patted her kindly on the shoulder. Oh, we're stealing more than that, she straightened. All right, let's get her to the van. The van? Hank asked, surprised. You said you wanted to talk to her. April walked up to him, her slender fingers arranging his collar. We do, but not here. We need someplace a little more private. Jesus, do you know what you're playing with? One wrong move and you're involved in felony abduction. She turned, asking, Cristal, if we give you some answers, will you come with us? Cristal blinked, seemed to be struggling with the question, and slowly nodded. April's eyes illuminated as she turned back to Hank. There, see? You can't abduct a willing participant. It's that easy. And it had been, right up to the moment the lone motorcycle had pulled up. He looked, half expecting the silver bullet-looking thing that Bridges rode, but had seen instead some sort of sleek cruiser with two riders. Hank had never been big on motorcycles, and this one had picked a lousy time to rumble up. Do you think the guy on the bike is going to be trouble? Hank asked as he glanced back over his shoulder at the traffic. Nah, Neil called from the front seat. It'll be days before anyone comes looking for Anea. It's not like the guy got a good look at me. For the moment, he thinks he pissed some guy off by sticking his nose where it didn't belong. Hank reminded, I made my living in the bureau interviewing people like the guy on that bike. Between him and the woman, they could put together a pretty good picture of what happened. Hank, April whispered, trust us. We're good at this. If a problem crops up, we'll solve it. We're not doing anything illegal. Well, what about how they attacked Hank? Or Hank Lyman? He started to say something, aware of the weight of Cristal's body at his feet, but April had reached over, her hand slipping along his thigh to send tingles through his penis. For later, her whisper deepened. Trust me, you'll never regret it. Hank closed his eyes and nodded, trying to keep from moaning as Her fingers found him through the soft fabric of his pants. In that state, he wasn't looking out the window as they drove into the private airport. Chapter 31. Oh shit, now it's getting deep. In his dreams, Sid was sledding across sparkling blue Bahamian water. He rode some sort of engine-powered surfboard. Dreams were magical that way. His super surfboard didn't even need a surf. It just jetted across the crystal waves, a foamy wake washing behind. He kept looking over to the white beach, backed by lush green trees. A woman stood there, her gaze fastened on him. She was a beauty with long black hair, sparkling obsidian eyes, her perfectly tanned body covered only by a skimpy yellow bikini. Sid grinned and waved, angling the surfboard toward her, knowing that paradise lay there, just across that short stretch of water. As he neared, she reached up, slipping the straps of her bikini from her brown shoulders, and the phone rang loudly. The dream. I wish I had dreams like that. I know. The dream shredded and left Sid clawing for the nightstand. He jerked around in his bed. Bits of beach, sun, water, and girl drained away as he fumbled for the receiver and rasped, "Yeah? Sid, it's Lyman. Fuck, it's 5 in the morning." He got one eye half focused on the digital alarm clock beside the bed. "It's about Cristal. She's been kidnapped." "What?" Sid sat up, aware of Claire groaning as she rearranged her pillow and curled away from him. "Who'd kidnapped Cristal?" "There was a paparazzo there. He got pictures, a whole roll of them. It's a bunch of people loading Cristal into a van. She looks drugged, drunk, or otherwise not herself. Oh, and Sid." Sid ran a hand over his face. "Yeah?" His mind was staggering, trying to comprehend through the cobwebs of sleep. He kept stumbling over how nonsensical it sounded. One of the guys manhandling her into the van is Hank Abrams. Yeah, but I only have a tan if I'm tanning or bake tanning. Otherwise, I'm more on the pale side. Yes, it's me with a spray tan. mm. Lyman rode his big Indian into the circular drive fronting Sheila's house and pulled to a stop behind Tony's C8 BMW. Rex's red Ferrari squatted like a menacing wedge at the edge of the steps. "Well," Lyman quipped as he kicked the side stand out and turned off the ignition, "the Bobbsey twins are here." "Right, just what I need after the last 20 hours." Sheila straightened a leg and stepped off before she began fiddling with the D-rings on her helmet. "Maybe they're busy at the pool and we can sneak in without them knowing. We'll tiptoe up to my room and crash. After what we've been through, do you think you could sleep?" "Sleep? In the classical sense? No, but I'm going to fall face first onto the floor if I don't lie down." She lifted her helmet off and shook her head to free her braid. Her face looked lined and gray, making her appear 10 years older than she was. "God, I'm worried sick, and I don't think I've ever felt this exhausted and run out." At that moment, Rex Gerber opened the front door. "Trick or treat," Lyman said softly as he stepped off the bike and undid his own helmet. He could feel the heat in Rex's gaze as he followed Sheila up the steps. Something in the man's look reminded him of the time he got an underage date back to her father's house 2 hours after midnight. On irate impulse, Lyman said, "Hi, Dad," as he paused Rex. Yuck it up, asshole. Rex muttered. Then he turned to Sheila, who stepped into the coat room and hung up her helmet and leather jacket. Sheila, can I have a word with you? It surprised Lyman when she whirled, a finger spearing toward Rex's face. I'm not up for your bullshit right now, Rex. Someone kidnapped Cristal last night. Rex backed away from the finger, frowned, and then blinked. What? You heard me. Lyman and I saw it. She reached back and began pulling her hair out of the French braid. We've got pictures. Kidnapped, Rex repeated. Someone got into her apartment last night and carried her away. We spent the whole night alternately talking to the police and the FBI. Like I said, we've got it on film. And Rex, you're going to love this. The woman that Cristal calls Copperhead, the one that sliced a chunk out of Manny's dick and caught my tampon, she's there. So is the mousy one. The one Cristal said was called Gretchen. The paparazzo that snapped the pictures was using a really good infrared film. You're not kidding. Sorry, Rex. Lyman sat his helmet on the foyer's marble table. It's as real as it gets. Rex seemed to mull over the words, then nodded to himself. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I liked her, Lyman. I hope you get her back. That's it? Lyman asked, propping his hands on his hips. Well, she's your employee. I don't see where this should involve Sheila. But it does. Sheila shot back. I hired her. I made that decision that day in the meeting room. We sent her after the people who tried to mug me in the hotel in New York. Then she stumbled over them at the Wilshire and again at Manny's. Now it appears she made them a little too nervous. She's in this mess because of me. Rex put out placating hands. Yes, yes, all right. We'll put the best people we can on it. But Sheila, let's talk to Dot first. See what kind of spin we can put on this. There ought to be a way to make a win-win situation out of it. Sheila blinked, wavering on her feet, and would have flown at Rex but for Lyman's restraining hand. He calmed her, saying, Easy, Sheila. Rex backpedaled, smiling. Hey, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was so rough. All night with the police, the FBI. Damn, Sheila. I wish you would have called. I would have come down and let my weight to... Shut up, Rex. I'm tired. It's been a long 2 weeks, okay? When a guy named D'Angelo shows up, please have a check for $75,000 for him. I bought his camera. $75,000 for a camera? She waved him off, starting for the stairs, only to have Tony walk out of the main room, a script in his hand. Hey, cool. Sheila, babe, we gotta talk. I've been on the phone with Jerry. He really wants a spot for you in Giant. You read the script, right? I mean, it cooks. I think you ought to jump on this, babe. It's got your fingerprints all over it. Tony, she muttered. Fuck off. She started up the stairs, then hesitated, looked back and said, Lyman, you coming? Right behind you, he added, shooting Rex a neutral glance. What the hell's all that all about? Tony asked. Someone put the bag on Cristal last night, Rex said. He sounded confused. Huh? What do you mean put the bag on? As in kidnapped. You got that? Someone abducted Cristal. No way. Then a short pause. And Tony said, Abducted? Seriously? Weird shit, man. Lyman shook his head, following on Sheila's heels. At the top of the stairs, he glanced back. Tony had a deeply pensive expression, his brow furrowed as if processing unsettling information. The look in Rex's eyes barely veiled the anger and frustration seething within him. Anger? Sure. Lyman seemed to have the inside track. But where had the frustration come from? When he closed the bedroom door behind him, he stopped short, suddenly terribly unsure of himself. Where the hell was this leading? Sheila seemed completely oblivious to the way this was going to look to the folks downstairs as she called, Lock the door. Lyman found the latch and watched her as she collapsed onto the chase and bent to pull her heavy boots off. After the last one thumped onto the floor, she stared at him, face haggard, eyes listless, her hands hanging limply from her knees. I'm worn through, Lyman. I have nothing left. If I have to deal with one more crisis, no matter how small, I'm going to break down and bawl like a baby. He walked over and offered his hand. Come on, let's get you to bed. Instead, she lifted one leg suggestively. These leather pants are a bitch. Pull. He did, helping her to slide them off. Then she stood and began unbuttoning her blouse as she walked toward the rear. Come on, Lyman. It's not the way I'd always dreamed of leading you to my bedroom. It was always supposed to be romantic seduction with expensive cognac, candlelight, and soft music. He followed her into her refuge, staring around the beautiful furnishings. The room was soft, white, and large. Against one wall, a fluffy canopy bed sported a huge frilly pillows. The dressers held knickknacks and photos of her family and old friends. The only other star to be seen was Morgan Freeman. When Sheila saw him looking at it, she added, He saved my life once. Talked me through a bad situation. Oh my god, guys, are they gonna have sex while he stares at Morgan Freeman? Okay. Yeah, I'm right if you're into it. um, Sheila dropped her shirt on the floor and walked over to the bed. Her nimble fingers unplugged the cord from the back of the phone. She tossed one of the big pillows to the side and threw back the covers. Unabashed, she undid her bra and let it slip away before pulling an oversized t-shirt from a top drawer. She glanced at him as she pulled it on. Are you as tired as I am? He shrugged. I couldn't sleep. I'm too worried. She crawled under the covers, patting the bed. Come, lie here beside me. Clothes on or off, I don't care. I just need you close, Lyman. I have to know you're here. Sheila, if I crawl in there, it'll be like necrophilia, she replied, closing her eyes. I won't feel a thing. I'll be asleep before you can pry my legs apart. He frowned, kicking off his boots, and slid under the covers, feeling awkward in his clothes. It seemed sacrilege to be wearing street clothes while encased in her spotless white linens, but a whole lot safer than the alternative. A curious giddy feeling tightened at the base of his throat. The sheets were smooth, scented, and his hard body sank in the bedding. She made a purring sound. Promise me you'll stay close? I promise. She snuggled against him, her hands slipping across his chest. Ah, he was remembering her body as she changed into her sleep shirt. She looked like a goddess, but an image of Cristal went into his weary brain. Here he was, safe and comfortable, beside the woman he loved. And Cristal, where was she? Scared, frightened, to torment him. His imagination pictured her bound, gagged, as one man after another crawled on top of her naked body. Oh my god. Ugh. I wouldn't put it past those people though. God knows what they want with her. The witches. Mm. Yeah. What do you think, Glickman? You can't see, but I put a hat on him. It was hard to get it on because his head is so big. But yet the other one, I think the other skeleton, I think it would have like overwhelmed his head. So it's like, what you gonna do, you know? Uh, she's my friend, Lyman, Sheila whispered, as if she shared his thoughts. She never asked anything of me. She didn't want anything from me. Just you and her and the whole world. We'll find her, he said softly. She's one of my people. I don't leave my people behind. Just hold me. Sheila pressed her body against him. I might embarrass myself, he said. Ah, kissing the side of her head. Aw. Lyman, I'm so tired. I'll never remember, but it's nice to know. A pause. Then a sleep softened. I love you. Oh, so sweet. I love you too. Oh, she was asleep that quickly. Lyman lay there, painfully aroused. What? His heart thudding against his ribs. The woman he loved more than life lay beside him, her body heat stirring, a sexual desire like he had never felt before. Yeah, why don't you jerk off while you look at Morgan Freeman? uh, get busy living or get busy dying. I'm hearing quotes from Shawshank Redemption. uh, and that added guilt to his whirling thoughts. How could he feel like that while Cristal was undergoing what? He blinked up at the ceiling, forcing himself to imagine Cristal's face, wondering where she was. Be safe, Cristal, he swallowed hard. What would it be like if she wasn't? What if they found her body in a ditch somewhere out beyond San Bernardino? No one should die like that, alone, frightened, degraded, and abandoned. Sheila's breath purled on his cheek. The shit's in the fire now. What does that mean, the shit's in the fire? Okay, chapter 32. What? In for a penny, in for a pound. Hank Abrams thought. Ugh, Hank! Sorry. I hate this jerk. Where had that saying come from? I don't know, it sounds British. How many years had passed since anything worthwhile sold for a penny, a pound? He looked down from the Gulf Stream to his window. The Rocky Mountains were glowing in the morning light. April slipped into the seat beside him. She flipped her burnished red hair over her shoulder. And gave him that challenging smile that made his blood race. Neil and Gretchen are asleep in the front seats. Enea's going to be out for at least another couple of hours. She pulled her muscular leg up, propping it on the seat back in front of her. So, how's it feel to be in the six-figure salary bracket? He shot a look past her to where Cristal lay propped uncomfortably across the aisle. Her mouth hanging open, drool had dried on her shirt. Her arms were bound to her body with silver duct tape. Her eyes, half open and slightly dried, reminded him of a dead woman's, the stare empty. That's what she's worth? 100 grand? April seemed to find that amusing, probably a lot more. The Sheik found her enchanting. He's got a thing for women. He's fascinated by blondes and redheads, but I think it's something cultural. He just craters for a brunette. Wait a minute. You mean we stole Cristal for what? A harem? April twirled her long lock of hair, a knowing amusement in her eyes. I like you, Hank. You really have a sense of indignation. A harem? No. At least, I doubt it. Maybe, if Enea's into it, she might make a play for him. The Sheik's a little different. He's a watcher. Hank swallowed hard. You guys are white slavers? Is that it? She turned, leaning so her face was close to his. Her steely gray eyes were alive with excitement. No, we're not going to hurt Enea. We just need to find out what she knows, that's all. If she's not a threat, we'll take a sample, reimburse her for her time, fear, and inconvenience, and let her be on her way. She ran a finger along his temple. God, what do you think we are? I don't know, you tell me. He took her hand in his, pulling it down and folding it in his so that she wouldn't remind him of his sexuality or of hers. I think it's time you tell me just what Genesis Athena is all about. April nodded. That's how we drum up business. It's the hook that brings in the clients. Clients? April freed her hand and settled back in her seat. What you became part of last night is one of the world's newest and potentially most profitable businesses. I told you, we don't do anything illegal. Just kidnapping and transportation across state lines. That's major jail time that we're into right now. April shrugged. Not if she's released with compensation. Like I say, the Sheik's interested in her. Yeah, so what? He watches her, then gives her a couple of bucks and lets her go? He snapped his fingers, just like that. Kristalina forgets she was lifted from her apartment and hauled across the country against her will. Probably so. April watched him speculatively. You see, we don't want her body, just her DNA. Excuse me. Then it hit him. That's what the little devices you gave me were for. Uh-huh. And had she not tapped our phone service in Colorado, we'd have taken her sample, added her to our catalog, and she'd never have been the wiser. So what do you do with the DNA? Patent her genetics? Sometimes, yes, depending on different genes people have. I thought that was the province of biotech labs, that drug companies and things were filing those kind of patents. April leaned back and took a deep breath. Hank, I couldn't help but watch her breasts swell the fabric on her thin silk shirt. You're thinking about U.S. patents? Well, or Hank couldn't help that. You're thinking about U.S. patents? Hank, there's a whole world out there. Genesis Athena is an international company. We have labs in the Persian Gulf, in Africa, Europe, and Australia. We even have a ship, a large. So, Jen, he whispered, that's right. You've been aboard with the Sheik, right? Uh-huh. So, she asked, now that you're getting the idea, are you in or out? Why me? You're bureau trained. You did a good job with Anea. We watched you. That was smart action on your part when she dropped everything and went to Toronto. Even smarter when you followed her to Colorado. Sometimes in multinational companies like ours, simple things are forgotten. We didn't think of putting a warning system in place in Colorado. Now we're notified immediately if anyone walks in the door and starts asking questions about Genesis Athena. Finally, you were right about the planning at Aeneas. You handled her perfectly. She never knew what hit her. In short, if you decide to throw in with us, we think you'll be a formidable asset. He's legit. Oh, wait, no. And how does Varel fit in? He's legit. His company provides security when we have people in New York. That's all. He doesn't ask questions, so we don't speak out of turn. Hank felt a fluttering in his gut. So what happens if I say yes? Her nose wrinkled with her smile. I've been looking for a partner. Gretchen's good, but, she's got issues. I like you, Hank. I think you've got potential. I mean, you were great in the sack. It's been a long time since I made love with a man who wasn't intimidated by me. Well, I think Emmanuel was intimidated because you were cutting off his dick. But I don't know if I call any of that making love, so. Mm. Besides great sex, what's it pay? We receive 50,000 a job plus royalties. Royalties. 2% of what the company makes per specimen. For Julia Roberts alone, Gretchen and I stand to make a couple million. What do you mean, Julia Roberts? Remember when her sheets and trash were stolen? That was us. I did the parasail jump from the helicopter. We got plenty of solid Roberts DNA out of her sheets and the tissue she used to wipe her makeup off. Jesus Christ. We'd love to do him, too. Imagine what he'd be worth. The problem is finding a sample, and you've got to prove who he is. People won't fork out that kind of money unless they know they're getting the real thing. Wow. The clincher is there's no law against taking another person's DNA for profit. Yeah, but there's a whole slew of laws against cloning, not just in the US, but around the world. Not in Yemen, she reminded, and certainly not on the high seas. That's what I meant when I said that we're not breaking any laws, strictly speaking. She jerked her head toward Cristal, and we'll make sure that she doesn't bear a grudge by the time we're through. Trust me on that. Hank glanced unsurely at Cristal. And if I say no, we ask you to sign a non-disclosure agreement, pay you 100 grand for your silence, time, and consideration, and hope you'll think it over and change your mind. I'll be sure to give you a number where you can reach us." He chewed his lip for a moment, aware of the challenge in her eyes. "So, how's Gretchen going to take you finding a new partner?" April leaned close and kissed him. "She'll get over it." "Uh-huh." She traced her tongue around his ear. "When we get to the Zogen, I've got a private cabin and a couple of weeks of vacation. It'll be like being on our very own cruise ship. I hate waiting that long." She rose up in the seat, glancing forward. "You ever had sex at 40,000 feet?" "Nope. The Bureau made us fly economy class. It's tough when you're folded into a center seat next to a little old lady." She reached over and unbuckled his seatbelt, pulling him after her. "Come on, there's a fold-down bed back here. We'll have to be quiet, but they'll be out for hours." "Are you crazy?" he asked, glancing back at where Neil and Gretchen's heads were lolled 2 rows away. "It's the only way to be." She led him back to the rear and folded down the little couch across from the tiny galley. Before he could protest again, she had his belt unbuckled, his pants unsnapped, and his fly down. April wrapped her long fingers around his stiffening penis. Her eyes were agleam, and her lips had parted in anticipation. "I hope she takes a piece." His hands, of their own volition, began fumbling at the snap of her jeans, then shoved them down over her round hips. His heart hammered in his chest, breath hot and racing in his lungs. "Turbulence!" She clamped her mouth on his, her tongue flickering and teasing. "What?" He bit off a moan as her grip tightened painfully on his erection. God, he had never known a woman like her. Then they were on the cushions. He was staring into her eyes, saw her pupils expand, dark and eternal. This would be a great time if, like, Gretchen overheard in her sleep and, like, came and ran over and was like, "I kill you, bitch!" Ah! He was staring into her eyes. Her pupils expanded, dark and eternal, as his throbbing penis slid into her silky sheath. She shuddered, her muscular body arching, and she tightened her vaginal muscles. "Join us, Hank," she whispered. "Oh, yes. God, yes," he gasped. Lyman checked his watch, and the digital numbers 216 flashed at him. He turned his head to see Sheila curled on her side, her red hair spooled over her pillow in a soft wave. She was sleeping hard enough that she didn't move as he slowly lowered his feet to the floor, picked up his shoes, and padded out to the anteroom. He closed the doors behind him before using the toilet in the dressing room. He stepped into the hallway, glancing down toward the stairs, and saw no one. On silent feet, he passed the paintings and sculptures and eased down the curving stairs. "Lyman?" Rex's sharp voice barked as he walked over to the little marble-topped table and reached for his helmet. "Yeah, Rex?" Lyman turned. Rex stood by the doorway that led through the parlor and out to the pool. "You and I had better talk." Rex made a jerking movement with his head. "Not here, outside, just the two of us." Lyman bit off a rueful smile, nodded, and followed Rex out to the poolside. There, Sheila's manager had set up camp, melting ice cubes floated in a half-empty glass of scotch. 2 scripts were piled atop each other, and file folders held copies of staple contracts. Rex dropped onto one of the white lounge chairs. He waved to the chair across from him. "She's still asleep?" Rex asked gruffly. "Yeah, and please leave her alone. She needs the rest." Rex's hard stare bored into his. What are you doing, Lyman? Mhm. Taking care of my clients? Really? Sneaking around so you can slip your dick into your client? What? Is that how you take care of her, Lyman? Lyman leaned forward, anger welling. Rex, I'm going to tell you this once. I don't have sex with my clients. Never have and never will. Yeah, right. He threw a gesture toward the house. What the hell just happened up there? You read Grimm's fairy tales to each other, made tea, and. Do you have trouble with the English language, Rex? I told you, I do not have sex with my clients. Period. Rex just stared at him like he was some kind of bug. You're fucking fired. Get lost. I don't want you here anymore. Oh, damn. That's not your decision. Lyman, I told you before, you don't want to cross me. You don't want to put Sheila in the position of choosing between you and me. You'll lose, pal. Don't be an asshole, Rex. Lyman sat back in the chair. I'm not playing this game. For the moment, I've got a bigger problem. One of my people was taken last night. Cristal may not be anyone important to you, but she is to me. Now, if you're finished swinging your dick, I'm going to check on what they've found out about Cristal and what I can do. Rex's flat stare didn't wave. Stop the bullshit, Lyman. Oh, yeah, you're concerned, all right. Have any trouble getting it up while you were worrying about Cristal? Or did that just make it all the more exciting? You're a real shithead, Rex. Mm. Lyman pointed a hard finger. And since you can't seem to understand that I could have just caught 40 winks up there, here's how it lays out. If I ever, he shook his head, forget it. It's none of your business. He got to his feet. I got things to do. Lyman, Rex called from behind him. Lyman, don't you walk out on me. Lyman shut the door behind him, nodding to Tommaso, who was coming toward him, another scotch in a tray. He said, Sheila wants to rest. If Rex demands to see her, tell him to go to hell. You got that? Tommaso, generally so very in charge of himself, started, Sir? Lyman gave him a pat on the shoulder. Just do it, all right? If you don't, he's going to kill her. Tommaso's dark eyes held his for a moment, and he finally nodded. Yes, sir. Good. Lyman made his way through the house, out past the foyer table, where he collected his helmet, and into the yard. Afternoon light cast a yellow glow through the trees as he pulled his cell phone from his pocket, turned it on, and punched the number for the West LA station, handling Cristal's case. Come on, Cristal. Let them tell me you've been found safe and are at the station giving a statement. But she wasn't. The police had nothing to report. Chapter 33. Sid was starting to think he'd been taken for a ride. The cab driver he'd hired at LAX didn't speak English. Sid didn't speak Spanish. He hadn't remembered that it took so long to get from the airport to Wilshire Boulevard. But then he'd been riding with Cristal last time, sharing conversation, laughing, enjoying the odd moments of just looking at her and thinking how pretty she was. This time he was in the back of the cab, his suitcase propped under one arm. While traffic moved, stopped, and moved again, the slightly pungent tang that periodically rose up from the floorboard suggested the greasy looking stain between his shoes must have had its origins inside a human digestive tract. Ew! I don't like that sentence. When he rolled the window down, all he could smell was traffic, and the Mexican cab driver called back that he was doing something to the Frio, whatever that was. Sid tried to think about other things. So it was with relief that the cab finally took a left onto Wilshire, proceeded another 3 blocks, and pulled up at the curb beside a fire hydrant. Estás agua? The driver told him. Es el número no? He pointed at the address on a jewelry shop window. Yeah, we ought to be 3 doors down. He hoped he was right. Lyman had taken him in the back way. The obnoxious odor rising from the floor made his decision for him. He forked out 35 bucks, opened the back door, and hung his travel bag over his shoulder. As the cab pulled away, he took stock of the sidewalk, then started down the block. Not every business had a number over the door, but Sid had the general idea. Lyman Bridges Associates was printed in block letters on a sign screwed into the brick wall. Sid sighed with relief, opened the aluminum clad glass door, and thumped his way up the wooden steps. At the top, he opened a security door and stepped into Lyman's office. He could smell coffee, the odor of wood and dust, and the slight mustiness of carpeting. June's fortress of a desk stood empty, its surface cluttered with a computer screen and keyboard, a blotter, a stand of pens and pencils, telephone, and all the other impedimenta of a good cleric. Soft voices were coming from the rear. Sid dropped his bag on the leather upholstered couch beside the door and walked past June's desk. He found Lyman's office occupied. Lyman himself sat behind the desk. June was half perched on one corner, staring down at the computer monitor. Another guy, a darkly complected, fit looking young man, lounged in Lyman's office chair. They all looked worried as they glanced up. Sid, Lyman cried in surprise, rising to his feet. What's the matter with you? Don't you check your machine? Sid asked. I just called before my flight left DC. He got a good look at Lyman's face, seeing the stress. What's the news? Nothing, Lyman answered, then gestured around. I think you know everyone here but Salvatore. Sid Harness, he said, taking the man's hand and feeling the bundled strength implied by the grip. My pleasure. I've heard a lot about you. Sid jabbed a thumb in Lyman's direction. He lies. Salvatore grinned. Then so does Cristal. She told the same stories. What are you doing here? Lyman asked, coming around the desk. How did you get here? He looked puzzled. Why? Sid shrugged. It's Saturday. I've got a slew of annual leave coming. I thought you might need a little help on this end. Having a tame FBI guy in the closet can be helpful. He scuffed his toe for effect. And on top of that, Cristal's my friend. A knowing smile molded Lyman's lips. Yeah, I thought so. You eaten? Not on airplanes these days. I grabbed a donut at the Winchells. Ugh, the Winchells is horrible. Down the block from my house. That was a little before 7 this morning. Lyman turned to June. Call Al's. Have him make up a to-go order of burgers. He looked at Salvatore. I'm on it, boss. The muscular man rose to his feet, nodded to Sid, and stepped out. June picked Lyman's phone off the cradle and tapped numbers by memory. What happened? Sid asked as June spoke carefully into the phone. Here's the photos. Take a look for yourself. Lyman led him to a work table in the office's back corner. As Lyman narrated the events, Sid fingered the photos. Each had that slightly off color of an infrared shot. The image quality was remarkably good. The guy taking the photos had started with the party walking down the sidewalk. Sid could see a figure being carried from the postures. Cristal was completely limp. Alive or dead, he couldn't tell. The series of photos led to an open van door, then pulled back, showing a motorcycle pulling up. You and Miss Mark, Sid asked. Lyman nodded. Sheila was going to spend the weekend with Cristal. Huh? It's complicated. Sid read the look in Lyman's eyes, let it go, and flipped through the rest of the photos. The most telling was of a tall man shoving Lyman and Sheila over, while in the background a familiar face was caught full on. Hank Abrams had been in the process of dragging Cristal's limp body into the van, but had looked up in time to see the man push Lyman's bike over. Hank's expression reflected worry and distress. What do you think? He's probably like, Hank, you asshole. What the hell? Sorry. Okay, there you are. mm. Sid thumbed through the rest as the van motored off. Is that a license number? Yeah, a rider rental. The local FBI is working on it. Sid tapped the stack of photos against his palm. How'd you get all this? Lyman chuckled, tension in his voice. Sheila did it. She managed to enlist the service of the paparazzo who shot this. Look, it was just fortuitous. The guy caught on that Sheila was doing something, tailed us, and took these photos. What? Lyman's shadowed eyes held no humor. It's how people live out here, Sid. Sheila wanted time to relax. She talked Cristal into letting her spend the weekend in her hotel room. We just happened to ride in at the right moment to see it all happening. You're sure it's Cristal these guys were after? Maybe they got wind of it and thought they were getting Sheila. Lyman bent and picked up a gaudy green flyer. Sid took it and unfolded the paper. The big letters jumped out at him. Genesis Athena. Looking up, he asked, You think that's what this is all about? Lyman crossed his arms, glanced at June, and shrugged. It's the best we got. Why? Answer that, my friend, and we'll know what Cristal was on the verge of discovering. What about Hank? Sid asked. I called his boss this morning. Varel says he knows nothing about any kidnapping. According to him, Hank is no longer in his employ. He says he took a position with a client. Sheikh Ahmed Abdullah? Sid said, remembering. You believe that? Look, I know Varel. Varel's security isn't into breaking the law. My take is that Genesis Athena offered Abrams a better deal. I think the good sheik just lifted Cristal. Did she tell you about the first time you saw her? About that night in New York? A little. I did some research for her. We know. He tapped a file folder that lay on the desk. Genesis Athena. What is it, Sid? What's the sheik doing? Why he grabbed Cristal? What she discovered that scared him so? Sid could feel June's probing gaze as she studied him. He shrugged, glancing at the woman. Lyman had a thing about surrounding himself with attractive women. You got me, cowboy. I just ran some stuff through the computer. He heard the rear door open and close down the hall. Salvatore had been really fast. She faxed me some papers, a questionnaire. I had the psych guys down at Quantico look at it. They thought it was a test of some sort, a sort of psychological evaluation. To evaluate what? A fine contralto asked from behind him. Sid wheeled and stared into the most bewitching blue eyes he'd ever seen. They pinned him like a study moth, and it took his floundering mind a moment to realize that he knew that perfect face, had seen it staring down at him with rapt wonder from the screen. Jesus Christ, he mumbled. Not even close. The goddess was offering her hand. I'm Sheila Marks, and you are Sid Harness, Lyman called from behind. When Sid's words failed him, he's a very dear friend and very old friend. Sid swallowed hard, managed to shake Sheila Marks's hand, and watched as Lyman pushed past, a frown on his face. What's happened? Sheila asked. What are you doing here? He looked past her to the tall, handsome man who waited in the hallway. Hello, Paul. Mr. Bridges, the man replied respectfully. And then Sheila Marks put her hands on Lyman's shoulders, looking into his eyes. Lyman, I have to know what's happened. Have the police called, the FBI. They won't talk to me, but I know that you have connections. Nothing, Sheila, not a word. No one has called here or even to her mother in New Mexico, for that matter. He seemed to harden. She might have just dropped off the face of the earth. Sid could feel the electricity flowing between them, could read the body language. For a moment, they looked into each other's eyes, and then Sheila Marks said, I have to find her, Lyman, no matter what it takes. Uh, uh. Gray dreams began to shred, giving way to a terrible, sweetly metallic taste that clung to Cristal's dry tongue. She shifted, vaguely aware that her body had the gritty feel of numbed cotton. A faint ache lurked behind her eyes. For the moment, it was fine to lie in the safe grayness, hanging halfway between wakefulness and the fragments of fleeing dreams. Some voice deep within urged her to surrender to the dream again, fall back into the mist of unconsciousness. It would be so much easier that way. Easier than what? A slippery premonition goaded her to blink. A white haze glared when she flicked her gritty eyelids. The fluffy muzziness in her brain refused to give way to thought. She pulled her hand up, hearing it rasp across linen, rubbing her eyes. She blinked again. Shit, was she hungover? Her tongue moved dryly, and swallowing was almost impossible. The first saliva tasted foul, really foul. She made a face. Pushing with rubbery muscles, Cristal sat up, aware that she wore only panties and a brassiere. Her glazed vision had trouble coming into focus, so she massaged her roomy eyes with her palms until she could make out the small white room. Her new cosmos consisted of a solid metal door, a table with plastic drinking glass and water pitcher, a round window, and her bunk. A smaller wooden door led where? To a closet? What the? She struggled with her brain. Thought seemed to be such a flexible problem. Where the hell am I? She pinched the bridge of her nose, trying to pin her mind in place. Home was the Residence Inn in West LA. She had been doing what? Getting ready for Sheila to come and stay the weekend with her. She had been where? Headed home after doing some last minute shopping. She could remember walking the supermarket aisles, selecting things to cook, things she thought Sheila might like to try. Then a faint memory stirred. First, it was the emotional recollection of fear, and then the hazy images of Hank Abrams, his hands up, a pleading expression on his face as he glanced at something behind her shoulder. A hand clapped over her mouth, dragging her back, the sting on her neck. God, where am I? She swung her feet over the edge of the bunk and stared down. Her shoes were resting side by side on the gray carpeted floor. Her clothes were neatly folded on a small nightstand at the head of the bed. She swayed as she stood, bracing one hand against the cold wall, and felt unforgiving steel beneath. A hard rap with her knuckles confirmed the fact. Her slim brown fingers contrasted against the white paint. Steadying herself, she turned to the round window and stared out in disbelief. The sun was either rising or setting, capping the waves with yellow, hollow troughs, dark and rippling as the muscular swells rose and fell. Shit, she was in the middle of the Pacific. On what? A ship? She pressed her nose to the glass, bending her face this way and that as she tried to see to either side. Endless water rolled off to the golden horizon. She made a face as she poked and prodded her stomach and abdomen. Why the hell were her insides so tender? Taking inventory, she could see a bruise on the back of her hand. From what? An IV? Her arms and shoulders were sore. What the hell had they done? Dragged her like a corpse? The effort of pulling on her pants almost tumbled her face first onto the floor. Binding the sleeves in her blue blouse almost defeated her. Her coordination wasn't what it should be. She took a deep breath, stretching, feeling the dull ache in her muscles. Then she grabbed the handle on the metal door and twisted. Locked. She glanced around, cocking her head. What the hell had Hank done to her? She tried the smaller door, opening it to find a compact toilet and sink. She turned back and hammered on the big steel door with the flat of her hand, yelling, "Hey, open this up!" The heavy portal seemed to suck up the worst of her violence. She stopped, listening, as panic rose in her breast. She could only hear a faint humming, the noise that of distant engines. "Hank, you asshole!" She hauled off and kicked the door, feeling a spear of pain in her foot. How long did she stand there? Her room had grown dark, so the sun was setting. Then she lost an entire day? Or had it been a terrible fear, like nothing she had ever known, slipped needles along her spine? She had noticed the switch on the wall, pressed it, and was relieved when the recessed safety light in the ceiling came on. She tried the pitcher. It contained water. Gratefully, she drank, aware of her dehydration. Then, opening the toilet door, she stepped in and relieved herself. Urinating proved uncomfortable enough that she checked for blood and was relieved to find none. The bathroom wasn't much bigger than a phone booth. Outside of the sink, a toilet paper dispenser was the only furnishing. She stood, pulled up her pants, tried the sink, and was rewarded with hot and cold water. "So I won't die of thirst," she muttered, before walking back to stare out the porthole at the darkness. She turned off the light to see better. Out there on the ocean, she could see no lights, nothing but an endless darkness. Swallowing hard, she whispered, "Dear God, I'm scared." Chapter 34. Oh my God, I would be too. Imagine if you woke up and you're like in the middle of the ocean. like, uh, Chapter 34. Given his name, Sean O'Grady should have had red hair, freckles, and mischievous green eyes. Instead, the Bahamian native looked anything but Irish, with a smooth black skin, angular jaw, bony face, and African features. He had agreed to meet with Lyman and Sheila through Sid's intercession. The tame FBI guy was already proving his worth. O'Grady and Harness sat across the booth from Lyman and Sheila. O'Grady had picked a Studio City Burger King for the meeting. The wreckage of the agent's dinner consisted of a double Whopper wrapper, empty box of fries, and a soft drink cup, half full on the plastic tray. Sid sipped at a cup of coffee and kept a notebook in his hand. Lyman and Sheila shared an order of fries, having eaten earlier. Sheila had dressed in stealth mode, wearing a loose Lakers t-shirt, faded jeans, sunglasses, and a scarf over her head. She looked more like a housewife than an internationally known film star. "We got this," O'Grady said, reaching into the pocket of his coat to pull out a little blue spiral-bound notebook. "Recognize it?" "Yeah, well, maybe," Lyman granted. Cristal used one that looked something like that. O'Grady passed it across, flipped through to the last page. Lyman thumbed through the pages, seeing Anaya's neat script. He noted that, true to her bureau training, each notation recorded the place and time of her writings. The last page, dated as 22:15 hours on the date of her abduction, consisted of a series of quickly jotted notes under the heading Genesis Athena. He read, Genesis Athena. Athena sprang full blown from the head of Zeus. She didn't pick that from random. DNA is the key. He's the 21st century version of the traditional Southwestern witch. But he is stealing more than just a person's soul. He wants it all. Yeah, the yacht Hank was on before, but she doesn't know that. She doesn't know where the hell she is. Yeah, Hank's in the other room probably. You know, fresh as a daisy. Oops. Okay. DNA from the rich and famous. What the old-time witches would have given for this technology. Question. If DNA is so easy to get, why make such a production of stealing it? Question. How much would an obsessed fan pay for a celebrity baby? Question. How do I break this to Sheila? Lyman frowned, glanced at Sheila, and tried to decipher her pensive expression. That mean anything to you? O'Grady asked. Sid had stood, stepping around the table to peer over Lyman's shoulder. Under his breath, Lyman whispered, Son of a bitch. What? Sid asked, bending closer to stare at the page of the notebook. Where'd you find this? Lyman tapped the notebook as he looked up. The floor. When the ERT went through Aenea's room at the Residence Inn, it was under the couch, along with a tube of lipstick. The only prints were lifted off it are Aenea's. We went through her place from top to bottom. In the process, we got a blood sample on a paper towel, a couple of smudged prints, all the blood from Neil, several hairs, and some evidence from the registration desk that we're running down. Rubber from the scratch they laid in the parking lot matches the compound in the rental van's tires. He smiled. Someone hosed the inside of that van down with bleach and a high-pressure system before they returned it. The credit card it was rented under led us to a P.O. box in Long Beach. Somebody named Lily Ann Gish had rented it. Lillian Gish, Sheila said softly. You know her? Sid asked, slipping back into the booth beside O'Grady. Sheila gave him a faint smile. It's an alias. They were playing with us. Lillian Gish was one of Hollywood's first superstar actresses back in the black and white silent film days. Same name Copperhead gave Manny, wasn't it? Lyman asked, trying to remember everything. Cristal had told him. He glanced at O'Grady. You might check the police report, see if that matches. O'Grady nodded, writing in his notebook. That business in the notebook, press any of your buttons? About the DNA, I mean. Sheila took a deep breath. I can tell you how much an obsessed fan would pay for a celebrity baby. How much? Sid asked. As much as they could leverage, she answered flatly. People would mortgage their houses, sell their cars, take out all the loans they could. She turned her sunglasses on Sid. Some would sell their souls, not to mention their bodies and the very blood in their veins. Sid frowned. And the business about DNA? Cristal thinks the celeb hits were about stealing DNA, Lyman supplied. But if you'll recall, we've had that conversation and discarded it. Stealing DNA? Sid asked absently, his face tightening in that old expression Lyman knew so well. Damn it, he was onto something. The problem is, Lyman continued, like Cristal says in her notes, why go to the trouble and risk? You can steal someone's DNA without sticking your neck out. You want Sheila's DNA? Swipe the napkin off her table at Morton's when she's done with lunch. Do you think that's really it? Sheila asked softly, her head lowered. Lyman glanced around the table and shrugged. Hell, I don't know. It's wild, but possible, Sid muttered, reading Sheila's deflated posture. You'd be surprised what people can do with DNA these days. Like what? O'Grady asked. Sid made an open gesture with his hands. I've been working a series of kidnappings, geneticists. In the process, I've had to learn something about the science, some of the things they can do. You wouldn't believe it. Remember Dolly the sheep? That was just the tip of the iceberg. Sid had their attention, so he leaned back, one arm on the seat back. Look, you've heard the bits and pieces on the news, right? Ted Williams being frozen, those extinct marsupial wolves in Australia, the frozen mammoth in Japan. The news is always telling us about something. Remember the calf they cloned from a piece of steak? The jellyfish genes in the monkey? Man, those are just animals, O'Grady muttered derisively. Sid gave him a flat look. You think there's a difference between cloning a sheep and a human? Well, it ain't the same thing. I mean, man, people are a whole lot more complicated than any sheep. Sid slowly took his head. That's your emotional reaction, Sean, not reality. Well, bro, you fill me in then. O'Grady had set his bulldog chin. When you're dealing with DNA, a sheep is every bit as complicated as a human being, sometimes even more so. One of the guys we've been looking for cloned extinct marsupials in Australia, used DNA extracted from museum specimens. Now that, let me tell you, was complicated. Shit compared to taking a sample from living tissue, isolating the DNA, and inserting it into another woman's egg. Sheila seemed to be wilting as Sid talked. Lyman placed a hand on her shoulder. What is it? In a small voice, Sheila said, It's all starting to make sense, Lyman. All of it. Cristal just handed it to us. How's that? O'Grady asked. You know why she was abducted? Sheila barely nodded as she stared down at her lap, head bowed as if in prayer. Marketing. Huh? Sid asked. How does stealing Cristal equate with marketing? Marketing what? Felonious behavior? Sheila took a deep breath. Lifting her head and removing her dark glasses, she looked from one to another, the deadness in her eyes affecting Lyman as no words could. DNA is easy to obtain, I understand that, but if someone like Chrissy wanted a Sheila Marks baby, how do you prove you could actually provide it? And Chrissy is her obsessed stalker fan. I'm thinking they should go to Chrissy, like the police should go and like hassle her, question her, like, you know what I mean? What she knows. Watch, they pay the money through some weird way, and the baby literally comes by like in a basket at the doorstep. That's it. No questions asked. Lyman felt a cold wash of understanding. Oh my God. That's right, Sheila said woodenly. You've got to be able to prove the DNA comes from the person you say it does. The customer has to know beyond a doubt that you've got the real thing, that he's not being built. I'm dense, O'Grady growled. What the hell are we talking about? The reason for the celebrity hits, Lyman swallowed hard, it's advertising. Don't you get it? If you're going to offer your client a chance to have a baby with Mel Gibson's DNA, you have to prove it's the right stuff. I mean, you can't show someone a pile of DNA and say, that's it, meet Mel Gibson's DNA. Son of a bitch, Sid whispered, a half-vacant expression on his face as his mind worked it over. He sat back, stiff-armed, unblinking. The questionnaire, Lyman added, another piece falling into place. Cristal wondered what they were screaming for. Excuse me? O'Grady asked as he scribbled furiously in his notebook. What questionnaire? It's the Genesis Athena website, Sid filled in. I sent a copy to Tanner down at Quantico. We're going to want to access that site and have Tanner play with it for a while. O'Grady chewed at his lip, his dark face furrowed. You're telling me that someone is stealing DNA from movie stars and what? Selling it to whom? People have to have babies with? Now, I don't know that much, but doesn't having a baby mean you gotta have sperm and an egg? He gestured with one hand. It's not like a piece of skin or a hair follicle can get a woman pregnant, you read? Sid worked his jaw back and forth. That was then, Sean. You ought to see the things they can do now. But sure, that sheep dolly and all, but it takes a laboratory, right? Yeah, Sid agreed. These cutting edge labs can mix and match, do just about anything with DNA. It's like ordering a car made to custom specs. You can choose everything. So, O'Grady asked, where's the laboratory? Sheila whispered, find Chrissy and you'll know. Who? Sid asked. The lunatic who's having my baby. Sheila said softly, but beneath it, Lyman could hear the cracked glass tone in her voice. Cristal was contemplating her growling stomach when a low knock brought her full upright out of bed. She was on her feet, prepared for anything, when the door, or was it a hatch, opened and swung back. A young man stood just beyond the threshold. The first thing she noticed was his inquisitive brown eyes. They seemed to sparkle with anticipation. She figured him for his mid-30s, with sandy blonde hair, a strong-jawed face, and a tentative smile. Two muscular men in coveralls stood behind him, darkly visaged, with close-cropped hair. Arabs? They had a menacing air about them. Security, perhaps? Miss Anea? The brown-eyed man's voice was laced with a seasoning of Scottish. He wore a white knit sweater and brown cotton pants. Who wants to know? She propped her hands on her hips, knees flexed, ready to flee or fight. Dr. Gregor McEwen, at your service. His smile deepened. Hungry, perhaps? Why would I be hungry? It's been 2 days since you've eaten. Come then, let's take you off to the cafeteria. She glanced over his shoulder, and he read her concern as she eyed the guards. Oh, don't worry about them now. Or don't be worrying about them now. They're more for my protection than yours. Really? What if it turns out that you're not friendly? Ex-FBI, against a marshmallow like me, you could probably pull my arms out of their sockets and twist off my head. He waved her out. Come on, let's eat. Surely you can't plan your escape on an empty stomach. His smile mocked her, an unsettling arrogance in his sparkling eyes. Crystal considered her options. Her belly wasn't going to fill itself based on the dreams she'd been having of steak and enchiladas and cheeseburgers, nor would she gain any understanding of her situation by staring at the walls of her prison. Sure, when she stepped out into a white corridor, the air seemed fresher. The steel walls were lined with piping, thick wire, and welded braces, all covered with a heavy coat of paints. This way, then. McEwen started off, motioning her to walk at his side. The corridor was just wide enough for the two of them. So, where am I? Aboard ship. Her name's the Zogen. And just where are we exactly? I can't say exactly. Navigation's not my thing. Somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic. Well, maybe a couple 100 miles off the main coast, actually. She gave him a skeptical look. How long was I unconscious? About 24 hours, maybe a tad longer. Why did you kidnap me? He gave her a sheepish sidelong look. I'm afraid some of our people panicked. Panicked? That's an understatement. Do you know what you just unleashed? People are going to miss me. That means federal as well as local police involvement. Hank and his little band of friends are going to be at the center of a hurricane. They stepped through a bulkhead and took a right into a wider companionway. She glanced over her shoulder. aware of the lurking presence of the guards. They watched her with flat brown eyes, faces expressionless. Nothing we can't make amends for, he said hopefully. I really do apologize. We'll see what happens. And it's currently under discussion, but I'm sure we can reach some agreement that will be mutually acceptable. Was he a lunatic or just plain nuts? Gregor, you can't kidnap a person, drug her, transport her across state lines. Hell, out of the country, and not expect a whole ration of shit to fall on you. Oh, I don't know. They took me in the beginning, bagged me right in front of me own house. It was only after I understood the potentials and the money to be made that I took over running the program for the Sheik. And a good choice it was. I'm now in charge of research and laboratory operations. Wait, you mean you changed sides in spite of what they did to you? What? Hold a little kidnap against them when I could be in charge of the most advanced genetics laboratory in the world. What others do in theory, we do in practice. Last, I don't even have to write a giant proposal here, or a grand proposal. He chuckled at that and pushed open a large double door. Inside, Cristal found a rather mundane-looking cafeteria, perhaps 30 by 40, packed with tables, plastic chairs, and a food line of steam tables staffed by 4 women, also Arab. If she was any judge of such things, she counted 15 people, still more Arabs given their looks and the subsilent tongue they spoke. Who sat at the tables eating? They were dressed in lab wear, green smocks, pants, and the women all had loose headwear that could be draped over the face. Females, she noted, sat strictly to themselves at a back table and cast curious glances her way. Help yourself, he instructed, as he led her to the line, picked a tray out of a rack, and added silverware, napkin, and a plate from their various stacks and holders. She was famished, no doubt of it. No doubt, too, that she needed to keep her strength up. The fare was mostly European in nature. Roast beef, lamb, potatoes, gravy, steamed cabbage, bread, and cheese. But couscous, hummus, falafel, and other dishes smacked of different appetites by the other diners. She opted for Coke, while he took juice from the machine at the end of the line. She followed Gregor to a chair, settling herself across from him. The table was a formica-topped, ubiquitous model that might have been found in any industrial lunchroom in the world. Neither of the guards had taken a tray. Instead, they discreetly seated themselves far enough away for privacy, close enough to be there in case Cristal lunged from McEwen's throat. Her days with LBA had heightened her sense of awareness about these things. Who are the Arabs? She indicated her head toward the others and attacked her plate. Geneticists, lab techs. They're the muscle and bone of Genesis Athena. That flare of arrogance betrayed itself again. Most of them I trained, so they're the best in the business. As she wolfed her food, she asked, I don't get it. Why steal celebrity DNA? McEwen studied her thoughtfully as he neatly cut roast beef into cubes, skewered them with his fork, and chewed. We want to be the first. To steal DNA. Not to steal it, to patent it, Miss Inea. You can't patent someone's DNA. It's personal. He laughed at that, genuinely delighted. Do you know that no law in any country protects a person's exclusive right to their own DNA? Not even in your dearly provincial USA. Bullshit. Oddly, bullshit is protected. You can't walk off with a wheelbarrow of manure from someone's bull paddock. That's theft. But once your DNA is out of your body, it belongs to anyone who can lay hold of it. He spread his fingers wide. Poof, gone. It's no longer yours. I don't believe that. Well, I can't affect your beliefs, lass, but when you do go home again, you may well be advised to check the statutes, see if you find DNA listed anywhere in the definitions of personal property. Meantime, however, let's just say I'm right. There is a huge precedent in law as well as in practice. What I can tell you that as a graduate of how often have you had a blood test? I'll say for cholesterol, perhaps for a blood chemistry board, to measure lipids, bilirubin, bilirubin, hematocrit, things like that. A few. Why? What happened to the extra blood? What do you mean? I mean, they may have needed a tenth of a millimeter. That's less than a drop, eh? But they took a syringe full. That's an extra 3 or 4 whole millimeters of blood. What did they do with it? Threw it out? Hardly. They sold it. Some they distilled for plasma, some for insulin, some for albumin, lots of things, right? So let's take the insulin, for example. Your body produced it, eh? It was part of you. Does anyone think once it's drawn that it still belongs to you? You could only stare at him in disbelief. DNA is different. I mean, as I understand it, I'm still using my DNA. Cells are synthesizing proteins, dividing, things like that. And all that insulin and plasma, you weren't using that as well? She stared. He chuckled as he spooned up mashed potatoes. Sorry, lass. No one cares. Laboratories all over the world are taking DNA samples from patients, and sure as to be, the very second they're coded, they're put up for patent. Some come from folk with resistance to diseases, others from people with a tolerance for certain environments, some even from athletes who show certain kinds of muscle tissue. It's a mad scramble, lass, to see who can get what first. A gold rush like in the Wild West. Companies are falling all over themselves, staking claims, and just like those long ago miners, no one knows which genes are going to be the mother lode. I think I've heard of something like that. Like if you get something taken out of you, like I don't know, like a tumor or even like an organ that's like gone bad or something, they don't let you keep it. When you're like, I think maybe if you really fight for it, I'm not sure. Because I've heard of somebody like getting something taken out of their brain or out of them, and they're like, I want to keep it. I don't know. I mean, it's weird. I guess you don't think of it until you're in that situation. Mm. And just like those long ago miners, no one knows which genes are going to be the mother lode. She stared at him, food half chewed in her mouth. Finally, she swallowed and managed to say, It's illegal to, what, patent another person's DNA? McGregor stabbed another square of meat. No less. Most governments around the world have only passed laws banning cloning, the artificial reproduction of another human being. They've said nothing about the DNA. In fact, by taking the stance that you cannot reproduce your own DNA, they have told you ipso facto that the state has more right to regulate your DNA than you do. I don't follow. Indeed, he took a drink of juice from his tumbler. Think of it this way. You're of the opinion that your DNA belongs to you and you alone. What's a clone? A copy of yourself. It's your own DNA that you're copying, not mine, not the president's, but yours. Now, if that was really the case, could the government regulate it? But that's not the same, isn't it? Fact is, you have the right to believe whatever God you want, read whatever book you want, join any political party, but not to control your own DNA. If you want privacy, stick to your beliefs, but don't look to your body, lass. The twinkle was back in his eye. But laws against cloning are laws that regulate your use of your own personal DNA in your opinion. You think you should have the say over your own DNA. I understand that. Most people, bless their simple souls, think they do. What they don't understand is that through fear that someone might clone himself, they've given that control over to the government, business, and most onerous of all, investors. How did that happen? Sheer unadulterated fear, lass. That and the social conservatives, of course. God bless the Christian religious right, wherever they live. They've given Genesis Athena a monopoly. I actually think I saw something like that in I didn't see the whole thing. It was a documentary on Netflix about some cult, some alien cult, I think. But anyway, it showed something, I think, during the Bush administration that they banned. I think when that sheep thing came out, that they banned human cloning. People were kind of freaked out. Anyway. Crystal's mind stumbled over the implications. You see, McEwen continued, all these technologies going way back. He gestured with his knife. Take insulin, again. No one objected to processing insulin from human blood that was going to be thrown away anyhow. Doing so was the best interest of society. Insulin used to be a touchy thing. You couldn't mix sheep with human, with artificial, and not have a reaction. The sources had to be pure. Millions of diabetics benefited and still do. It was the precedent, you see. DNA just got folded into the same blanket. You get my drift? She glared at him. So why kidnap me? Why do you have to break the law if this whole operation is legal? He chuckled. Ah, the grandstanding. Why? Advertising, of course. We've got the product. Oh, to be sure. We'll be sending little apologies and even checks in the mail as things begin to fall into place. Admitting to our stunts, as it were, and offering reparation. Legal division's already been hard at work over that. Legal division? You've lost me again. McEwen waved his greasy knife. It's all going to come out in the next year or so. The clients can't be expected to keep their silence. What's the point of having a little Julia Roberts running around the kitchen if you can't brag about her to your friends, huh? When it does break, it's going to be one of the biggest stories since Bin Laden. Thing is, we don't want to look like simple criminals, so we'll make the restitution to the aggrieved parties. His expression sobered. It's just the right thing to do. Image and all that. Wait a minute. You stole all these people's DNA. They're going to patent it and then send them some sort of pittance to make it right? And why not just stick a check in the mail now? It's cheaper if they don't have time to think about how they've been gypped, she said sarcastically. Because the less they know now, the easier it will be to get our samples. After the story breaks, things might get a wee bit trickier. People will be more careful. Not that it will do them much good, mind you. The common folk in the streets have no idea how much DNA they leave around in restaurants, hotels. Jerry knows. Jerry knows. Their clothes, cars, even when they lick an envelope. Crystal shook her head. I'm still not understanding how this works. You take the DNA, patent it, and then what? Sell it, of course. To whom? Anyone who will pay for it. Give me an example. McEwen leaned back, pushing his empty plate away. Well, take Princess Diana of Wales. Our marketing research determined her to be one of the most beloved women of all time. Getting the sample was the riskiest operation we ever undertook. I'm sure you've heard of it. She jerked a quick nod. The lab in Paris where her forensic samples were curated. We had a huge list of applications just waiting for us to succeed. We've done brilliantly. The first embryos have been implemented in the clients. We've already got a list close to 200 candidates for implementation. We've banked over $1.5 million in deposits alone. Embryos? Crystal asked, her fork halfway to her mouth. Damn it, it just sank in. You meant it when you said little Julia Roberts earlier. Hey, McEwen said, reading her confusion. You see, Miss Anea, we're not just selling the DNA in a bottle or anything like that. When we sell it, it's alive and ready to be implanted into the host mother. Chapter 35. See, and now I'm getting freaked out since I said my DNA for that DNA test. No, nobody wants to clone me. Like, we're looking for a really crazy person. We're looking for Chapter 30. Oh, I probably should stop here because it's 8:07. It's lost track of time. Whew. Okay. I'll pick it up on chapter 35 tomorrow. What did you think of that? I'm not screwed. Nobody cares. Believe me, nobody cares. Who would even be screwed? I mean, but I think Dwight makes a good point. The government have all kinds of top secret studies going on. I mean, you got to imagine in like every country, right? Um, I mean, they've been caught like in the past, right? Like was it the Tuskegee people? They put syphilis in them, and it's like, there's been some weird experiments. So, um, who's to say they would just completely stop all of that? I mean, I guess maybe we don't have the budget, but yeah, it's creepy. Well, China, I mean, sure, they have money, but Europe, Europe has a lot of good labs. I mean, look at that Novo Nordisk. I think actually even the COVID vaccine that came from like Germany. So, and then of course, it could be anywhere. It could even be smaller countries if they give enough to it. Like, would Russia be considered a smaller country? I kind of consider them that way. I always consider like if you were to travel to Russia, there'd be nothing but like empty bottles of vodka and dirt. But I could be wrong. Well, now, aren't you afraid some lass is going to steal your DNA and make babies from you? Yes, give me a break. I just think the idea of selling babies, there has to be so much ethical implications that I would assume that is illegal too. Like the process of adoption is often known as being incredibly expensive. I think in part because you have to have like go through like registered place. I mean, I guess I've heard of some people that sort of do an adoption, but not really where it's like a family member. Like maybe you have a sister, like a little sister, and you raise her baby, like, you know what I mean? Maybe she dies or maybe she's not well. Things like that. Because I know on the Real Housewives of Dallas, one of the ladies had a few like daughters and she wanted to try for another baby and that she wasn't able to, but she had adopted a baby and she didn't say exactly how, but it was through someone they knew. Like, and the baby was like, got it like right away or a week later or something. So I think some of them happen like that. But I just think, honestly, I think about there was a story of a veterinarian in Chicago that was trying to do um like in vitro. He was trying to do something like um it was to get a baby, like he was gay. So it was through that, like to get a baby to abuse sexually. Um, and I think that that's part of why I don't think you can just buy people. Yeah, especially like very vulnerable people like babies. So yeah, I wanted a little boy to, yeah, and it was already coming to, yeah. The kid they adopted was almost 6, and they got him, and he's just spoiled, annoyed little shit now. Who are you talking about? Right? A family member of mine adopted spoiled little shit. Yeah, I guess that runs in the family even when they're adopted, huh? I'm not paying child support. Shut up. I don't know where it's going. I have no idea how it's gonna end. If I had to guess, if I was writing this at this point, well, we know they're going to Chrissy, and that's I feel like that makes sense. Because because they like have a lot of reasons she's there, and how does she get approved, But like if it's true that it's all like legal, like if that's true, then well, they would get them on something. I just am thinking more with like what they've done along the way, so unethical, and like Hank is such an asshole that I feel like in some way there's got to be like a fight between April and Cristal, and Hank ends up having to choose, and he kills April, and then Cristal kills Hank, and then Cristal realizes that she's a lesbian, and and ends up with Chrissy and raises Sheila's baby. That I don't know. Make it into Bridges and Anaya security. We'll see. Pick it up on chapter 35 tomorrow, Thursday. Yeah, and then doctor and fucking medical stuff next week. I'm gonna have to do the X-ray, which my arm's been bothering me so much. Like it's getting worse. So no, I hate blood tests. I hate it. And I could have sworn that one doctor that moved away, like from like a couple of years ago, that she had tested my thyroid and it was fine. But here we are again. Because I got those veins that don't come out. Anyway, I don't want to think about it. I guess just get it over with. Maybe I could just do that. Is it a fasting one? Because maybe I could do it Friday or something. Because it is only Wednesday. Could I get this over with before I go into next week and just be done with it? Maybe. Maybe I should if I feel up to it. And then I should spoil myself with like pumpkin donuts or something. I'm not an expert on anything. They hydrate, helps them pop out. Yeah, maybe for you, maybe for a man. And what's going to happen with Lyman and Sheila? Because with Rex, is like basically fired him. And he said that he won't ever sleep with a client. And he obviously loves her. He wants to be with her. So, I don't know. We'll see. Oh, the outfit. This. Couldn't think of what's the top to wear. I guess if it was like a cat suit, but so. What's tonight? Yes. It's Wednesday, normally Big Brother, but I'm still behind. Anyway. I get some sleep. I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to take a few cough drops and work on my voice. I'm sorry. If Rex fired him, she's no longer a client. That's true. That's true, I guess, yeah. Yeah. I was thinking that he could get another client, but it takes up so much of his time. I guess he could just protect her for free, live with her, and look out for her. Hold her hand and go to the movies. I don't know. Okay, good night. Love you.